busy week here at the Behind the Counter offices. I'm kidding. I don't have an office. Do you guys like comics? Me too. Do you guys like vampires doing crazy cool shit? Me too. I hope you're reading Bloodstained Teeth out from Image Comics. Volume 1 is already on the shelves, and Volume 2 is out in May. Earlier this week, the 10th issue dropped, final issue so far, and I got a chance to talk with co-creator and artist of the book, Patric Reynolds. I cannot recommend this comic enough. Here we go. Hey guys, welcome to the show. Patric Reynolds. Patrick, how are you today?
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh no, I just said let's do this. This is my
let's do
first
it, man.
interview after finishing Bloodstained Teeth last week, so got a lot of stuff we can talk about. Yeah, so let's fire away.
So you're one of my favorite artists working in comics right now. Let's get that out of the way first, because the rest of it is just going to be a very derogatory. No, I'm kidding. So yep. You're legitimately one of my favorite artists working in comics right now. I love Bloodstained Teeth. You said you just completed work on it, and this was a co-creation between yourself and Christian Ward, right?
That's right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please go into it, man. I love the book, and I'm probably gonna fanboy out like a little bit on you, but like talk to me. Like,
so. Yeah,
awesome.
One thing I noticed is that I'm also just as big as a fanboy as fans. If we have time, I'll get into my first meeting with Dave McKean.
I would love to hear that.
Say I think security might have been involved. I was gushing over him so hard, but like. So Bloodstained Teeth happened. I mean, it's weird to think about it. Like it happened. It started over 2 years ago. And 2020, January 2021. My gosh, yeah. It's weird to think about time frames. But Christian Ward was somebody that I had always admired. Of course, his work on Odyssey and Invisible Kingdom. In addition to everything else that he does. Has always been something. It's always, I look at him like I would look at like Bill Sienkiewicz or, Dave McKean. It's his artists who are just really awesome, and you have no idea if they're ever going to interact with you ever. Yeah. And so when Christian Ward looked me up on Twitter or sent me a DM on Twitter, he's like, "Hey, I really appreciate your work." And immediately I was like, do you have the right Patric Reynolds? I didn't, it's just, when someone like that, looks you up and seeks you out, it's always mind-blowing. And he said he had a bunch of ideas for stories and he would like to collaborate on something. And I said, you just tell me what to draw and I'll do it, basically. But he had shared a couple of other ideas before Bloodstained Teeth, but and I liked all of the ideas, and but when he proposed Bloodstained Teeth, I don't want to talk about too much about his process, but he said that he thought of the title first before anything else. And then he also, when he was thinking about the title, he thought like, okay, how do vampires fund, living forever? They must be super rich, right? I mean, that must take a lot of money. And he thought like, okay, immortality must be pretty expensive. And so he thought, vampires must be billionaires, right? And at the time I was like, you had me at vampires, basically. Right. So, but then he started talking about like all this other, social and economic context. And I thought, of course, right? Like, vampires as billionaires, that's not too far from reality these days. So,
for sure.
He was just talking about like, how, about that idea. But then, he started talking about the character of Atticus Sloan. And, he said he's sort of like a David Bowie analog where he thinks of himself, as somebody who's a lot cooler than he probably is. Not to say David Bowie is, but he fancies himself as like a David Bowie character where like he's sort of above on the cutting edge of fashion, but he's actually kind of like a couple of decades behind. And so he wears 70s outfits. He wears these huge collars and these colorful outfits, trying to figure out what cool is. Like he can buy his lifestyle, but he can't buy like coolness. He seeks it out through musicians and through 70s music and all these other things. Like he tried, throughout the course of the series, he's trying to buy that, he's trying to get that. He's always an outsider He's not even a member of the firstborn elite that he's up against. He is a vampire, so he's not human, so he doesn't really belong anywhere. He's always like a misfit, but he's
Mm.
trying to use that coolness to fit in somewhere, you know. And I thought, geez, that seems like, you know, a pretty compelling character to bring to life. And then he started talking about the other characters, like, you know, Joey, his consciousness is like the Jiminy Cricket, if you will, of the story. And he's like, this character is his key to like not being basically a sleazy bastard. You know, it's like it's like if there's anything good about Atticus, it's his friend Joey. And I thought, what a great character dynamic. And so I just started creating all of these character designs, you know, and looking up like analogs for them. Like we thought about Robert Pattinson as an analog for Atticus Sloane, and then we sort of landed somewhere between Lucifer from Wicked and Divine and David Bowie during his Thin White Duke phase, you know.
Okay.
And Joey was sort of like, you know, the antithesis of that, like the surfer dude with the floppy hair, like Owen Wilson, like who really needs to start dieting, maybe, you know, is sort of like his look that we started going for. And then all the other characters sort of kind of begat like from them, you know, like those were our pillars, you know. And as we're going, you know, I thought like, okay, well, I'm really interested in having environments and settings be something that contribute to the story. Like when I was doing Joe Golem, like that unique setting was very important. Like that's not something that somebody had ever seen before. And so I was really conscious of creating like a setting that was also very important, you know. And so I thought, okay, we're like the seedy underbelly at street level of this world where vampires control everything. And so I thought, okay, we're gonna have to focus mostly on night scenes. So I started researching, of course, Blade Runner and Tokyo photography at night, and somehow, you know, trying to make that its own thing, but also make that a character. And of course, Heather Moore comes along and just, you know, melts my face with what she's doing and just emphasizes that in a way I'd never seen before. And so her colors also become a character in the story along with the setting. And so like I wanted people to be like, you know, have a very clear idea of where they are. You know, I wanted to immerse the reader in the believability of the story by making every, like, the environment, character, something that people can feel. You know, there's an element of humanity to everything, the textures, everything like that. And I wanted people to feel stuff. And so when Christian came to me, you know, my stuff is really gritty and street level. His stuff like belongs in the cosmos, right? Ghost Rider, Silver Surfer, Thor, all those kinds of things where you just have like these, you know, if Jimi Hendrix were to, you know, color a comic, it would probably be something similar to what Christian Ward would do. And I thought, like, how do our styles meet? And Bloodstained Teeth as a result, you know, like he thought that like the colors that Heather Moore was doing fit well because my stuff was so real and grounded that like both things emphasized each other, if that makes any sense, you know. So that's where that sort of synergy happened. And I just sort of, when I finished my stuff, I just let Heather Moore cook. You know, I'm like, you have these great ideas where there's like, you know, patterns and swatches and textures that I had never seen before. I didn't know what to think of it at first. I guess that's what people would probably react if they heard if they were at their first Pink Floyd concert. Like you're experiencing some kind of cosmic revelation, you know,
where you can hear colors and all that stuff.
Exactly. Like, and I'd never seen coloring like that before. Usually the colors I work with are, you know, Dave Stewart and Lee Lowridge and Luis NCT. Colors too a little more, you know, realistic or sort of emphasize realism, and Heather Moore, which is on the other end of the spectrum. But, you know, the result was something that was completely unique. And, you know, I really have to credit Christian for seeing that first, or for having that idea in his head first, because I never would have thought of that on my own. So anyway, so that's sort of like how it happened. And then like 2 years later, we have, you know, Bloodstained Teeth. So
it works. The book has made it to the top of my stack every month that it's come out, to be honest. And for me personally, like as a fan, like, and I've been reading comics since I was a kid. We're probably around the same age. So like that like I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned, that sort of like neo-noir
Mhm.
style of that book combined with the concept was like an automatic home run for me, you know, like because
Yeah,
sometimes like as much as I like to flip through previews to order my books,
yeah,
I also enjoy the process of getting stuff sight unseen. And this is one of those books where I'm like, all right, I know these guys are going to be the creative team on this, and went to the store and flipped through that first issue and was like, you know what? This is an automatic home run for this guy, you know?
man, that's
Um,
super heartwarming. Thank you. I never
mm,
know how people are going to react to stuff like, I spend
mm.
so many hours with this stuff 6 inches in front of my face, and I only see the mistakes, and
Yeah,
so I have
yeah.
no idea how people are going to react to it. When issue one came out in April, last April, like I had never had seen a reaction like that before to anything I'd ever done.
Oh wow.
And yeah, well, even I mean, I've done worked on Serenity and Aliens, and those fan
Mhm.
bases are incredible. And I still get
Yeah.
people talking to me about Serenity. God, I love the Serenity fans; they're great.
That Serenity fan base is off the wall dedicated. Like I don't think I've ever seen fans of that cat like in that cat. There's certain franchises where like Serenity's up there, and
Mhm.
the Avatar
Yeah,
Airbender folks are also like in that upper echelon of like no, they're lifers, you know.
yeah, as they should be. It's a great. I mean, the whole universe is terrific. When I had to do
Mhm.
research for Serenity, I had heard of it, but I didn't know anything about it. I actually watched the movie first, and I
Okay.
remember liking the movie. And then I watched the TV series. And it's unfortunate how that played out.
Yeah.
The first episode got mixed up with the second one, and but the characters, that like
Yeah.
uh, intrigued me. And like when I was taking writing classes and when I was going to the Savannah College of Art and Design, like
Mhm.
that's what we focused on is Robert McKee's story, where it focused on like characters are important when they make choices and decisions. And that's what makes all my favorite characters in
Mhm.
comics, like, or in TV. And like Ellen Ripley in Aliens, it's about the choices she has to make,
Mhm.
and I'm watching The Last of Us right now. I've never played the game, but like the choices those characters have to make, was what makes them interesting. And so like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that kind of those choices that humanity is something like I really want to focus on. So I don't know if that answers your question, but but yeah,
Yeah, sure.
uh, yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, it's really like I haven't, and Christian was just this is not his first creator owned series by a long shot,
Right.
and he would just send me messages saying, "Hey, you enjoying your buzz?" I'm like, "Is this what buzz is?" I guess so. I mean, I've never
Mhm.
felt it before, and when I hear people talk about it's interesting, like hearing people tell me how they react to it. In my head, I want to tell them, you understand, like I wish I could have drawn this better. I wish I could have done
Mhm.
this. But in my head, like I'm like, don't ruin their experience, man. Just let them tell you how a comic you made them feel. That's why you do this.
Yeah.
is to change the way people perceive the world, and I'm very lucky that I get to do that every day, so yes.
That's awesome. It's like being in a band too, where like you're the only one who knows the notes
Yep.
that you didn't hit. You know, like you're because in your head it's like and that's a credit to you as an artist because like you're obsessive over your own work. It's your
Oh
baby.
yeah.
You don't want to phone anything in. So that's I commend that.
Yeah.
Um, but you mentioned before that you're done with Bloodstained Teeth. Is it over? Was it a finite story to begin with, or was there room to? Is this volume one, and then a possible volume two might happen?
I think it's sort of like Christian, to my knowledge, he always sort of planned it as a series that would go um, to a finite amount of issues. Now, so
Okay.
it changed a little bit. Like we wanted to start out with like a 5 issue arc,
Mhm.
and then maybe, but then I think he just, as he was writing, he just had so many directions and things he wanted to include that it expanded. And I was like,
Mhm.
sure, let's do it. We did talk about like doing some, like there's so many opportunities to do spinoffs with
Right.
series. Like issue 9 comes out tomorrow, and there's a character in it called Vamp Man that I would
Uh,
like to, that would who was a vampire who was like, because he's now a vampire, he thinks he's a superhero. We can turn that into being a superhero. And I
mhm.
had, I referenced Batman 1989 for the first 2 pages. My favorite Batman movie, well, close. It was the first Batman movie I ever saw that I loved. We'll put it that way. And I thought,
Okay.
God, every character here could be, have their own series. And
Absolutely.
so,
I'd be on board for the Bram Stoker series.
yeah, I mean, like, not to tell you how it all ends and that kind of thing, but like, I think, we did talk about, moving on and stuff like moving on to other things, and there's a possibility in the future, but I think for right now, just because, um, you know, uh, like I know Heather Moore has got other projects she wants to do, and I think like she is so integral to this process or to the story that
Mhm.
like we decided to just to sort of put it on the shelf, for maybe we'll come back to it later, maybe not, we won't, but like but if we do know that like other characters, there are so many other angles we can explore, but for right now it's going to be on the shelf. Like I definitely need like a break for a minute,
I'm
as much
sure,
as I
yeah.
love working on it, it's just it's a very labor intensive process, and so I wanted to do like some other some of like smaller things too, but like gosh, um I really think that I miss drawing the guy. We'll put it that way. Even though he's a vampire bastard,
Yeah, yeah.
especially after drawing the last issue and how it
Mhm.
all wraps up, like I'm like, God, it was just so well written, and it was just so
Mhm.
well contained after it finished. I thought like, man, even if we do leave it, it's still a very incredibly satisfying arc of everybody
Mhm.
here. Not gonna say how it ends, of course, but like it could very well, it could work any direction we want to go. But for right now, it's going to be it's on the shelf for a minute, but hopefully, we'll see.
You never know. I think the book would lend itself. Again, this is me, my own personal fanboy stuff. I feel like that the whole, if it's collected, it would lend itself very well to like a museum quality type
Yeah.
packaging, because I would love to see like your preliminary sketches, or even like if Christian sent you stuff or things like that, like just because I, like you guys, it seemed like, you just reading the book, it seemed like you guys meshed extremely well together.
Yeah, I thought we did too. Like, there were a couple of times where, after the initial character designs and that kind of
Mhm.
thing, like, he just sort of let me go on and do, what I thought might be best. And there
Mhm.
were a couple of times where, particularly with the Pensmiths that you probably saw in issue 7 when they first came around,
Mhm.
like, like we both decided we really wanted to nail that character. Or those people, they have a very specific look, and so we passed around designs back and forth. Like I would draw a concept sketch, and he would sort of modify it a little bit, and then we go from there.
Mhm.
um but yeah, for the most part, like, we really didn't, like, there were a couple of things we had to like a couple of tweaks we had to change, but for the most part, like, we sort of let each other just do our thing, because I think we both realized that like what ends up on the page is totally different than like we as individuals probably had in mind. But the most
Mhm.
important thing is like what we came up with together, how it evolved into a thing that's completely on its own. And like I was used to doing things more, more realistically and that kind of thing. And so as the series went on, I knew kind of what Heather what would do. And so like sometimes I would leave panels a little bit more open for her,
Mhm.
do like these really cool textures and stuff like that in the background that that my inks cannot capture. I
Mhm.
can only go so far with black and white, so I would sort of like leave a bit of room for her to like, hey, I know she's probably going to emphasize the when this character jumps through the window, and so I'm going to like probably not put too much detail there. And so I think we just sort of like left room for everybody to do their thing, because we knew when everything was done, it would be like the whole would be the most important thing. It's sort of, I
Mhm.
always make this analogy, and I know that people have listened to me interview before are used to me saying this, but it's like, I love John Coltrane so much, and I love jazz so much, particularly in the 1950s and 60s.
Mhm.
And you can hear it, but it's all about listening, and it's all about like collaborating on stage, like live, right?
Mhm.
And like Miles Davis would, plays muted trumpet on Kind of Blue, then he would back up and let Coltrane do his thing. Then you hear the drum fill in, and then but everybody sort of knew what time it was to come back together and make a song. And so there was this synergy, and sometimes I get really selfish. I get really precious about me. So I'm like, I don't want anybody messing with this. It's a cool
Uh,
so I just drew. But then I thought, no, let people make this thing bigger than what you are, and you're a part of
Mhm.
this, and it's not yours. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to, I spend so much time on this stuff, that I've actually learned with Bloodstained Teeth is to not let it be, so precious to me, because
Mhm.
when everything is done, it's really cool, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm just a part of it. So that's
And
sort
you
of how,
know it's going to be cool too. It's not
yeah,
like you're going to do something and then this team in particular is going to give you a dud at the end of the day. It's going to
no,
be
no,
a home run. I want to talk about your art style a little bit because to
yeah,
me, I'm a big fan of your art style. I see a little bit of Michael Gatos in there. I see some Lee Weeks in there. I see some Alex Maliev in there. Yeah, yeah.
I'm honored. My gosh,
There's I'm a big nerd, so like I'm gonna throw
sure,
those
yeah.
names out at you.
No, I get you. Yeah,
But
yeah.
like, so like, what were some of your influences? And I'm gonna piggyback on that a little bit with your bio says that you started in 2009 and left your old life behind. So let's
Yeah.
let's talk about the art influences and then just jumping into comics.
Yeah. When I was about, when I was about 17, oh my God, I
Mhm.
hate to start things like that, but really, I went to a comic shop when I was 17 after my art teacher told me to go look up. I mean, I love comics, when I was
Mhm.
a kid. But I think the first comic I ever bought was the Dark Horse Presents Aliens
Oh, cool. Yeah.
series, but that's when they came out in like newsprint, with
Yeah.
that beautiful Bernie Wrightson cover of that
Yeah.
alien. That was the first comic I bought. And then
Mhm.
I think it was Terminator Secondary Objectives, because I love the Terminator, I love aliens. Those were my gateways
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
these things. Then they became, and then I thought, oh, they're also comics. Wow. And
Mhm.
so I started. I wanted to draw comics, but I didn't know, like, instead of just drawing cool pictures of Terminators battling aliens, my art teacher was like, "Can you tell a story though? That's what you need to think about. Is like lots of people can draw,
Mhm.
but think about sequences and stories and telling stories with pictures. You should look up Arkham Asylum by Dave McKean and Grant Morrison." I'm like,
Okay.
really? Yeah, man, the Joker's just grotesque, man. My teacher
Mhm.
was a little bit of a hippie, but like
Okay.
he understood that, like, um, uh, there's a difference between someone who wanted to draw cool stuff and someone
Mhm.
wanting to like tell stories. And he thought that I could that I needed to learn how to tell stories very astutely. And so when I saw Arkham Asylum in Comics Utah in Salt Lake City, where I was born, where I grew up, I opened it and the first page was like a bat fossil, and I'm like,
Mhm.
what? And then every page was painted, but not painted. There were like nails and burlap glued
Yeah.
into the surface of things on top of like Joker, who was based off a Punch and Judy doll. And I thought, what in the world? And I couldn't even read the Joker's fonts, but
Uh-huh.
it goes into the Joker having multiple personalities, and but him sort of, and then out the whole Alice in Wonderland allegory. I'm like, this is a comic. And I immediately went home and started drawing Batman like that. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, this is like, I know aliens are great and cool, and I bought a couple of X-Men comics, but like this is different. This like
Mhm.
makes me look at comics a different way, and I wanted to draw that, I all the books that I was assigned to read in high school, like Grendel by John Gardner and like
Uh-huh.
Crime and Punishment, I would do in comic form.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I was, it was, I wanted to like realize stuff in ways that made sense to me that I thought were interesting.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, like my parents were like, yeah, so you really need health insurance, pre-existing conditions, so
Yeah.
doesn't look like you can make a lot of money drawing comics. Why don't you start
Yeah.
teaching? That way you can do your art in the summer and then, have health benefits, that kind of thing. And so I actually went to school at Utah State University and got a
Mhm.
degree in illustration, spent a lot of time with wildlife painters and
Mhm.
and people drawing, beautiful portraits of women playing instruments in fields, which were
Mhm.
beautiful. But I was like, I'm over here drawing Batman as if you were a Christ figure. No one cares about that, like, especially in Utah. I mean, come
Yeah.
on. Like, I was just this weirdo from space in my art classes. And, but then I realized after a couple of years, I'm like, no, you need to learn how to paint and draw first. You got the idea, sure, but learn technique
Mhm.
and and like learn how to be taught.
Mhm.
And so I got a teaching degree, and I went to teach in Las Vegas. And After like 3 years, I thought this is not where I need to be. I have an incredible amount of respect for teachers and the teaching profession, but like I was exhausted. I was 24 years old and I was miserable. My hair was falling out, and
Oh
the
wow.
best part of my week was going home on Friday and going to the bar to forget about it. I'm like, this is not what I need to be doing. And so I just said, all right, let's give art a try. And my dad was like, who would suggest that I teach because I need to have the health benefits. He felt so bad. He's like, here's what you do. Why don't you try plan A? Why don't you actually do this? And I thought, okay, so I'm gonna have to make time to do it. So every day after school, I would go home and draw a page in my sketchbook. I would just do it. And no matter how tired I was or whatever, or exhausted, instead of like being miserable and falling asleep watching Golden Girls on Tuesday night, I would say, draw a page, and that I started drawing in my sketchbook, and it turned into a graphic novel about my biological father, who was not a really big part of my life. And I thought, okay, well, I'm doing something that means something to me, and I think I have a lot to learn, but like this is I want to keep doing this, and I and I don't know how this happened, but like in high school, I applied to go to the Savannah College of Art and Design. I couldn't go because it was too expensive. I had other brothers and sisters in college, and I had to go to a state school, Utah State, because it was just way too expensive, even though I applied to SCAD. And like after my third year of teaching, somehow SCAD found me in Las Vegas. I don't know how. They got some weird black ops stuff going on. Like, and they sent me a postcard in the mail when I was living in Las Vegas saying that, we're recruiting for graduate school. You should apply. And I even scoffed at it. I even called my dad, and I was like, my dad is my stepdad, but I called him my dad, and he's like, I was like, they want me to draw funny books for money. Can you believe? He's like, you need to go. I've seen how happy you are when you draw this. I've seen like how miserable you are when you don't. You need to see what they have to say. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I took this graphic novel about my biological father and showed them to, I put on a tie, got my portfolio together, and went to this meeting at the Hampton Inn in Las Vegas. And there was an animation professor who was looking at my portfolio. He's like, okay, I think you can probably go here and be successful after you learn how to tell a story and that kind of thing. I think you have some potential. I'm like, okay. And so I told my parents, I'm like, they think maybe I could do this. And they're like, well, we think you can. My parents had a lot more faith in myself than I did. We'll put it that way. And so SCAD sent a professor from their sequential art department just to talk to me like a month later, just to look at my portfolio. It was Ray Gatto, who was still there. And he looked at my portfolio and he's like, yeah, you should apply immediately. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, storytelling, you got to work out, but you can learn that, but so I did. And I applied for the MFA program, and I was riding home from work one day, again, exhausted as hell. And I was listening to Tina Turner at full volume, just to like drown out what was happening.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, Tina Turner's version of Simply the Best at full volume will vanquish evil. Oh my God.
100%. 100%. I sing
God,
that at my wife more often than you would think.
Oh my God. God bless you, because like beautiful song, that and Don't Stop Believing by Journey. That was my coffee for the day because I can't drink caffeine. Yeah. And I was driving home, and I think Tina Turner was playing in the background, and SCAD called me when I was driving home, and they're like, hey, is this Patrick? And I'm like, yes. They're like, we want to offer you a full fellowship for the MFA program.
Wow.
And I think at the same time, over the radio, I heard Simply the Best. And I was like, you're kidding. I almost crashed the car. Like,
oh my God.
And they're like, are you okay? We hear sirens. I'm like, no, I just almost crashed my car, but thank you. It's fine. And so what happened was I told my parents, they're like, okay, well, put your house on the market. We'll be down there in a week, and we'll drive you to Georgia to go learn how to draw comics. I'm like, really? Like, yeah. So, and this is in 2008 during the housing crisis. I had to let my house foreclose because I couldn't sell it. But we literally packed all of my stuff in a trailer, which was a TV with a VCR in it, a VHS copy of Fight Club, and a typewriter, and I think a futon. And we drove from Las Vegas to Savannah, Georgia, to start my life over at age 29. so I can learn how to draw comics. And I don't know how many parents would tell their children to do that, but mine drove me there. So
That's awesome. That's a great story. And like,
yeah,
God bless supportive parents, man. That's phenomenal.
they they
Um,
they so were. And at a time where I think they just felt really bad that like that I was so miserable, and they had
yeah,
sort of like pushed me into that place, and they thought like, no, why don't you try plan A? You can figure this out. We'll figure this out,
that's
and
great. Yeah.
yeah, and luckily I was only there for 2 years, in the middle of my second year, we had editors day, and I showed my stuff to Chris Warner at Dark
Mhm.
Horse, and then I kept emailing him back and forth, and I still wasn't, getting any work. I was getting very nervous. I'm like, I may have to go back to teaching. And finally, like, I just started emailing Duncan. I emailed Duncan Fagredo, who was doing
Mhm.
Hellboy, and Duncan, who is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And
Yeah.
he sent my work to the editor in chief at Dark Horse at the time. And the next day, that editor got back to me and said, would you like to discuss projects? I'm like, absolutely. And then started with an 8-page story in MySpace Presents, called What Should I Find There, which was Dr. Brooms, who was Hellboy's father.
Mhm.
It's his first paranormal adventure, and then after that, I got Abe Sapien the Haunted Boy, and then, everything kind of grew from there. So yeah, I was very fortunate to like get that work, and that's not something that is typical. But I also knew that like I had to put myself in a position to be fortunate too. So um, there's no day that goes by that I'm not incredibly thankful for what I do, and now I get to work with people like Christian Ward, you know. So it takes time, but like that's sort of like I always when I post my work on Instagram, I always put hashtag trust the process, because it is
Mhm.
absolutely a process, and all of those hard things are part of it too. So yeah.
That's a great story. I feel like everybody who I've talked to doing the show has had such a wildly different story of how they got into comic books, and it's never the
Yeah.
same for any two people. Now,
Mm.
like a question about just the moving around, like what was that like moving from Utah to Las Vegas? Like you don't really make that that's not something you would think of as
No.
like a move, so like what was that like going from Utah to Vegas and then from Vegas all the way to the East Coast to Georgia, because they're three wildly different cities.
Yeah, and then to Portland.
So Portland, Oregon, yeah.
Yeah,
So
where I am
yeah.
now, you know, it's sort of like it's weird because like I never after college I was never really settled. I've never,
Mhm.
until I moved to Portland, I never spent more than 3 years in any one place.
Mhm.
But it wasn't like I wasn't dissatisfied somewhere. That's just where the path took me. Like I needed to go to Las Vegas for the job. I needed to go to Savannah for
Mhm.
art school. I needed to go to Portland, to be around this incredibly vibrant comics community here. Like Dark Horse is
Yeah.
here. Um, Image Comics is now here, and Oni Press was here, before the Line Force thing happened, and there's just so many people who just settle down here. It's here or LA. I think that was probably one of the most visible communities on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But I like Portland because it was closer to home, and but also like I, just have a lot of friends that were already here, and so I thought, why not? It's interesting because like the only thing that actually has been with me through the entire thing is this drafting table right here.
Oh
um,
wow.
that I'm sitting on. It was made, I think it was made in the 1940s. My dad picked it out. Me
Very
and my
cool.
dad picked it out at like Goodwill. And it was like $30, but like it is the size of a battleship. Like you couldn't set it on fire.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, old school, like giant.
indestructible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and all these marks and stuff like that looks like a Jackson Pollock painting. When I
Mhm.
sit down, I know a process is happening. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
my brain and my body like conform to like this. And as we'll get to like why that is something that is been something is something that girlfriend just came home, sorry.
No worries.
Why that is something that uh is actually starting to affect my health, actually. As
Oh,
I,
really?
yeah, like there are months that go by where I, just because I switched to digital during Bloodstained Teeth
Okay.
because like I was just taking too much time, and I needed to find a way to get things done faster, but also be a person. And I'm
Mhm.
still learning that process, and it's easy, to I don't have to talk myself into this job, but it's so easy to like, start working when the sun comes up and look up and 5 hours have gone by and you don't even know,
Yeah, yeah.
and as I get older, I'm 44 now, like that stuff takes a toll on your body.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, like now that I'm in a committed relationship, like, I noticed that like I cannot sustain like working for, months at a time with a few days off.
Right, right.
Like I think since November 11th, I think I had 4 days off, and it's
Mhm.
not because like, I'm being pushed to do this, just because like this is how long the process takes for me.
Yeah.
So, drawing digitally was sort of an effort to expedite this whole and streamline it, and Christian would, the whole time Christian was like, I'm trying to get you to like not cut corners, but to like streamline your process. So he actually
Mhm.
pushed me to do this. He's like, I'm worried about you
Oh,
actually.
that's very interesting.
Yeah, he was very concerned about it. He was like, because I have some medical issues that need like managing and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And if I take a day off to go to the doctor, that means I have to work extra hard the next day.
Right, right.
So I can't sustain that, but it got to a point where I got it drilled in my head when I was in art school saying like, okay, you need to be dependable. You need to have editors depend on you, and you need to show them that you can finish things and that you're committed. Because finishing things in comics is probably the most important thing you can trait that you can have besides drawing well.
Yeah, yeah.
Being able to finish stuff is like paramount. And there's a lot of people who can draw who can't get things done. And so I, got that in my head, and I was just so conditioned to it that like all that health and personal stuff like was just sort of always pushed to the corner.
Mm.
When I was finishing Bloodstained Teeth, it just sort of got to a point where I'm like, I cannot do this over and over again. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I have to like work against I have to work against what's in my heart sometimes. I have to let it go for a day, and I
Mm.
have to like not put as much detail into this skyscraper, even though I want to
Yeah.
so bad. It's hard to do that. But like I've been looking at artists like Sean Phillips and
Mm.
Ed Brubaker, especially Pulp. Christian actually gave me a copy of Pulp for my birthday. He's like, look at this. See, this stuff is really simple, but it's very effective. Look at this stuff, He's always
Yeah.
thinking about stuff like that. So, but yeah, I know that's a long way around of saying like, again, this is all part of the process too.
Yeah, for sure.
You look at Mike Mignola's work; his stuff was pretty realistic, but as he got
Mm.
farther and farther along with Hellboy, he was able to say so much with showing not a whole lot of art, and he
Oh
didn't have
yeah, yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, there's a reason, like, and that's what makes it so effective. He doesn't have to do that, like he is
Mm.
so effective at reducing things to such simple and dynamic things that, like, I hope I get there one day, is what I'm telling you.
Yeah,
So,
well, I
yeah,
mean, there's a lot to be said in I think modern comic book storytelling
yeah,
where less is more, and it works for certain artists. Like Mignola is
yep.
he like less is more works for him very, very well. Like that, I don't know if you picked up his the book that I believe was released post pandemic, where it was just like single page sketches.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think I followed those on Instagram. I don't think I have the book, but yeah, I think I've seen
yeah.
that work from that period.
But
And
those are perfect examples of his work where it's like less is more. I think Pulp. It's funny that you brought that up because I was just thinking about that book today. That's the only graphic novel I read back to back in one sitting. Like in
yeah,
the last like few years.
great
Um,
story. Mm-hmm.
and I think it's also like that less is more approach works, and but depending on the artist, because sometimes
Sure.
less is more with certain artists. You're like, well, you should have done the more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a little bit, right?
yeah. Sometimes, but so you transitioned from traditional like pencil and paper to digital. What are you using for digital? Are you iPadding it? Do you have a tablet? Like what are you
Yeah.
doing with that?
I still do the pencils traditionally because they're
Okay.
just contour lines. Those don't take very
Mm.
long, but they still have to compose the panel. And at some
Mm.
point you still have to draw things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so my girlfriend actually, who was also an artist and who works digitally and traditionally, but
Mm.
she uses uh, Photoshop a lot, but she also uses an iPad, and she introduced me
Mm.
to Procreate on an iPad.
Still awesome.
And yeah, and I was like, and I, of course, I'm such a purist that I was like, oh, well, I'll have nothing to show when I'm done. I'm drawing on glass. I'm a
Yeah.
traditionalist. I need to feel the paper, and I do. But at the same time, though, I need sleep, and I need to
Yeah.
like be
Yeah.
with my girlfriend. I need to be a person, and so it was a process. And she will be happy to tell you that it was like I am a glacier. I do not change quickly, you know. But when I
I,
do,
I
you
hear
know,
you.
but when I do move, it's it takes a minute, but
It's right into the
hopefully,
hull of a ship.
yeah, I can hopefully I can sink ships, or not, with nobody on them, of course, but like uh, but uh, but that's just how I've always been. Is like I find something that works and I try to do the
Mhm.
hell out of it, and so traditionally was working from an artistic standpoint, but not from a person standpoint and
Yeah,
a
yeah.
deadline standpoint. And so, as much as I resisted, I knew I had to do it. And so, I just every once in a while, like I would try a panel digitally. Like issue
Mhm.
4 of Bloodstained Teeth is where I started doing that, where Christian took over for a minute with the art duties,
Mhm.
and we had to transition our work together. We had to like do a couple of panels where they would transition into his colors, from my inks. And so he helped me make room for that, and I was like, he was like, what do you think about doing digital stuff? And of course I would, be really resistant to it. But then I was like,
Mhm.
I have a day off. Let me try to do this panel traditionally, because I was really worried that it would look like it was digital.
Okay.
That was the thing, is like I wanted to make it look like it was still drawn,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of digital artists whose stuff doesn't look like they drew, but it's still beautiful. But that's sort of,
Yeah.
I wanted to make things look like it was done by a person, by a person, and
Mhm.
not a machine. And so I was really worried that like digital stuff would not afford that. And then I found Procreate. I'm like, oh, I found a couple of brushes that were close to the dry brush stuff that I draw.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
another person on Instagram uh, turned me on to the Rusty Nib brush set from True Grit ink supply. And there's the whole brushes are based on like gritty dry brush things.
Mhm.
And I found like about 6 different brushes that I thought would replicate pretty close to what I was doing with my Raphael Series 8404 Sable brushes in my
Mhm.
Crow Quill pen. And it worked out. And sometimes I would test it on Twitter. I'd be like, okay, one of these is traditional, one of these is digital. Which one is which, everybody? And people were like having a hard time with it. They're like, I think it's this one. I'm like, okay, so if they can't tell,
Yeah.
that's okay. And then Christian was like, I can't tell the difference between what you're doing here on Procreate and what you're doing traditionally. I'm like, okay, if he
Mhm.
says it, then I think I'm okay. So, and that's how it started. And I had finished issue 9 and 10 all digitally, and I get worried that like, people, who look to buy originals and want to see originals, I
Mhm.
worry about denying people that. But at the same time, though, I have Bloodstained Teeth was over 200 pages, and half of that, at least half of that to 2/3 of it, is still traditionally.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
have plenty of traditional stuff to go back on if I need to, but this is stuff that I need to finish so I can go and take a break and be a person.
For sure.
So,
And
you know,
listen, you could say, hey, listen, I don't have the originals for this, but I could send you or make you a beautiful giclée or lithograph.
yeah, and a
You
lot of people
know?
are doing that. Like I'm with my art rep, Bob Schott Comic Art House, has a
Mhm.
lot of artists he represents, and Yannick Paquette is one of them. And he makes just really awesome single prints of a page, just one print, I think, and he
Mhm.
sells those for a comparable rate to an original page.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I know that like I was at Rose City this year, and I heard people talking about that. You're like, I went to some artist's table, and they don't have any traditional stuff anymore. It's kind of a bummer. And I thought, yeah, I can see why they would think that, because like
Yeah.
a print is a lot different than, you know, a thing where you can actually see the whiteout. You can see
Right.
the salsa stains in the corners
Yeah.
of your page, right? And there's a couple of pages on aliens that did they actually have my blood in them. You know, I'm a little shaky with an X-Acto knife, and actually there is some blood over the ink there.
uh,
And there's something very Viking about that, you know. So, but you know, but if artists are like, you know, doing things that look just like traditional things, and if the process is just as, you know, thoughtful
yeah.
and sometimes even as labored as a traditional thing, like, you know, I'm okay with that. You know, and plus, like I said, I have so many other, you know, I'm not going to sell 98% of my original pages anyway, and so I have plenty of those to show people as well. You know, but yeah, so it was just a necessary thing, and you know, I still like going, man, I wish I would have done that page traditionally. But then again, like, I'm happy to go to bed at 9 p.m. and not 1 o'clock in the morning. So
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's better for you in the long run, you know,
yeah.
because you're saving getting older, got to protect those joints, you know.
You do. And yeah, I mean, you have to. I sit on a saddle chair that's used by doctors and tattoo artists now, not because it's super comfy, but it's because, like, I don't want my back to disintegrate into a sawdust, you know, when I'm
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know. But I've gone to the emergency room, you know, because I've worked too many hours. In 2013, I had to go to the
Wow.
emergency room when I was doing Exile to Babylon, and City of Roses, back in the day. Like, my body was like, yeah, we're gonna start bleeding for no reason. I'm like, okay. So you know,
Yeah.
I was sitting down and working too much. Like, you know, it's difficult. Like, I try to listen to lots of people about these kinds of things now. Like, Shonda Rhimes is somebody I listened to during her TED talk. You know, you know, Shonda Rhimes is responsible for so many TV shows as a writer
Yeah.
and as a producer. And her TED talk, she talked about that. She talked about, like, you know, just how hard it is to stop working.
Yeah.
And she said that if you get the chance to do the thing you've always wanted to do, you'll do anything to be the best at it, anything, and you will push anything out of the way to get there, because you know how hard you had to work, you know how precarious the whole situation is. And I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, that's it, you know, but I can't do anything if I'm dead.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. And so she just started saying, like, I'm gonna make time to do 15 minutes. I'm gonna play with my kid, you know. And you know, and I still forget stuff like that. When I was finishing Bloodstained Teeth, you know, God, you know, my girlfriend was like, hey, let's go take a walk. You know, let's why don't we watch John Oliver together? And I'm like, okay, you know, and still that was not a lot, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we have a 13-year-old Chihuahua who needs to go outside 4 times a day, and so that was the only chance I got to see the sun sometimes. But it's really nice to have a partner too that's there to remind you of what you're missing out on, and
Oh, for sure.
what all your labor is actually affecting. It's not just myself anymore. You know,
Absolutely.
people in my life, you know, important people in my life miss me and I miss them. So,
Yeah.
but, you know, hopefully, like, I learned a lot with Bloodstained Teeth and how to streamline things. Christian really helped me out with that, and how to think about things in a way that's not so labored anymore. And
Yeah.
I really think that I'm a better artist for that. And I am grateful for the things he's taught me, you know, and to how to look at things in a way like that, you know, because he does like 3 or 4 projects at a time, you know, and he's like, he was telling me, like, yeah, I got 42 pages to do by lunch. And I'm like, really? Yeah, he'll get it done too. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And like, I spent 3 days on this one establishing shot that people are going to read for a couple of seconds. I think my priorities are a little mixed up. So anyway, but that's a long way to say, like, yeah, it's comics are fun and cool. So,
How
yeah.
long is this break? Like, when's the next thing gonna kick up? Are you gonna just enjoy your time and take like light work here and there?
That's kind of the approach right now. I know for a fact that you know, I have a variant cover to do for a DC Comics, and which I'm very excited about. And you
Can you
know,
talk about what it is or no?
I think I can say, like, it's for I can't say anything. I can't say too much about it other than it's, like, you know, one of their main characters. So I
Okay.
have to be careful. But and I, you know, I've never done a cover for the big two before. And, you know, Dark Horse and Image, of course, you know, but
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, but I have plenty of time to make that happen. And Christian's been talking to me about stuff, the next thing and that kind of thing. And I really want to take a break from interiors because I'm really tired.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I love doing them, as much as I love Bloodstained Teeth. I'm pretty tired. And I just want to, I have Emerald City coming up in the first week of March. And I love that sort of pieces. It's my favorite show ever. And
I hear that. I hear that from everybody who tables there.
So it is such a comic artist or a comic creator friendly show. I love it.
Yeah.
I've gone there every year since 2011, with the exception of the pandemic. When they had to cancel it. But I'm going this year for the first time in 3 years, and I'm looking forward to it. And so, like, I love doing commissions for people because I get to do what I want, and I get to do.
Right.
Someone will say, like, I love it when people say, like, can you just pick between Iron Man and Enchantress? I'm like, okay, why not both? And I get to work on, I get to paint Iron Man, for somebody. And that's a great palate cleanser, for whatever the next thing is, but I also know that, like, if I wanted to, I could talk to Christian about the next thing, and he's already got like 4 or 5 already. He's like, how about this? Let's talk about it, and in fact, after I talk to you, I'm going to talk to him about, another thing. So
awesome.
Yeah, anyway, so
that's awesome. I feel like also, like now, from what I've gathered and from whom I've talked to, the commission market is booming for everybody. Yes. Yeah. Like I got a couple of buddies who are full-time artists, and they're like, they'll text me and say, like, yeah, like, thank God I opened, because they were like, one guy in particular, I'm not gonna name names, but he was very much like, I've refused to do commissions for years, and it was a mistake because as soon as he opened them, it was like 24 orders in like a day, basically. And like, he's not charging like a pittance, like, obviously, you have your rate, everybody has their rate,
Yeah, I was the same way. I thought of commissions as people wanting me to draw their dog or something, and so I was like, oh, I thought I was above it somehow, But then, like, when I first moved to Portland in 2011, like, I was between jobs. This is right after I finished Age Sapien, and right before I started City Roses and Exile Babylon. I wasn't working. I was really nervous. I'm like, what do I do? And so I just started doing fan art, like, of things every day. I was like, all right, it's Iron Giant Day. I'm going to do an Iron Giant thing. And back when I had Facebook, I would post it on Facebook just to, like, see what people thought. And people started offering to buy stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, well, today's going to be Iron Man. And people would be like, oh, how much? And I would be like, I would price things like Rain Man would say numbers like, yeah, about $100. That's seriously what I would tell people. I had no idea how to price. I still don't know how to price my work. I always,
tough.
It is, and Bob Shaw, my art rep, God bless him, he's doing the Lord's work. He's trying to get me to charge more because, like, I just don't know how much my work is worth. Like, I will, as many hours as I spend on these things, I don't know if you can actually put a price on it, and so I might as well say, like, pay me some cookies, I don't care, to me, like, the most important thing is the chance to just do this stuff, right? But now, like, Hope Bob has been very good about, like, saying, okay, you should be charging this, and I'll kind of meet him a little lower than that, which frustrates him, but I'll be like, okay, maybe I'll bump those sketch cards up a little bit, because I still want people to afford $60 versus like a $600 original page. I still want people to be able to have those options too, but I also just like, doing a little sketch card and spending a couple of hours on it, like, just to see, like, do I like drawing this character? Do I actually, what would it be like? And, I've all the Batman ones, I'm like, okay, yeah, I still like drawing Batman. So
can't confirm,
but I, commissions keep me afloat when I'm not, on other jobs. Like during the pandemic, that's what kept me alive, or kept me financially stable, is just being able to turn to my art rep Bob Chauncey, just open up commissions for a couple of days, and thankfully people respond very well to those. So
oh yeah, there's always somebody out there who wants something, even if it's like stuff that you're doing on your own. I found, what's the most unique thing somebody's requested from you?
Oh my God, sometimes I can't really repeat it, but like,
what I've heard, I should rephrase that question, because that's definitely an answer I've heard before. Yeah.
I see, like, the most unique thing is someone wanted me to do let's see, Mr. Miracle and Big Barda.
Okay.
And but they didn't really tell me to do anything weird with that. But I thought like, okay, I didn't know the characters very well,
Uh-huh.
and this is before like Mitch Gerads and did his wonderful run on that, and
Mm.
it was such a visible thing, and so I thought, okay, well, I also like other kinds of art too. So why don't I do them in the style of a Rodin sculpture?
Wow.
There's a Rodin sculpture called The Kiss, where
Hmm.
two characters like it's just this beautiful romantic encapsulation of what a kiss is, but it's very figurative. And I thought, okay, so let's base those two characters on these two figures in the statue, and it's like I think it's also emblematic of those characters' relationship too.
Hmm.
So I would kind of turn it into a unique thing, only because like I can't do things like these beautiful detailed things like for instance Clayman. I can't
Hmm.
do things that beautiful and detailed. But I always go back to Arkham Asylum where I'm like, what made me think this is interesting is because and I thought like, well, there's all these textures and cool things, but it made me think about the characters in a different way. So how do I do that?
Uh-huh.
How do I do something that makes the characters look like something you wouldn't expect, but also something that makes sense for who they are. And sometimes I'll just say like, oh, Wolverine, cool picture of Wolverine. Yeah, sometimes all you need to do.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
I think one person wanted me to do the entire cast of the Endless as sketch cards, so they
Oh
could frame
wow.
them all together. And I thought, oh boy, and I didn't know who all the Endless were at the time. After
Okay.
the Sandman series, I do, but nothing really too weird or interesting, like
Uh-huh.
I think someone wanted me to do. There's been some obscure characters,
Hmm.
like Alpha Dog and Alpha, no, Strontium Dog and
Wow.
uh, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the character name. I'm so sorry. Uh, the characters from Strontium Dog, Johnny Alpha. That's who it
There
is,
you
Johnny
go.
Alpha. And so I had to research these characters, and I thought these are, so it's actually made me want to, find out more cool characters. It's expanded my horizons just by
Yeah.
trying to figure out who these characters are. That's a long way of saying like probably Big Bart and Mr. Miracle kissing. So
Okay. Fair enough. I'm gonna ask you a couple more things, and then I'll let you get
sure.
out of here. Well, this one I want to hear. You touched on this very briefly before, and you mentioned
Yeah,
it before we started. Can you share that Dave McKean story that you alluded to?
I sure can. Um,
Please do.
so this was San Diego Comic Con 2008. This was the year that no wait 2007. This was the summer
Mhm.
before I moved away from Las Vegas.
Mhm.
But I knew I was going to go into comics. And so I had my portfolio there with me and stuff. And my best friend Andy, who was also a teacher, who
Mhm.
also was encouraging me to draw comics. Like he was an English teacher, and his journals were like these beautiful sketchbook diaries, and that actually inspired me to start my sketchbook a
Mhm.
day thing. Was what he was doing. He was an English teacher, but he went with me to San Diego Comic Con. We're wandering around on Sunday, and I'm taking pictures of like of people dressed as like Darth Vader and stuff like that, and everything like that. And we walked by this table, and I don't know how my friend recognized Dave McKean because he didn't know who he was. um,
Mhm.
but there's Dave McKean sitting at a table signing stuff, and my friend Andy turns to me and goes, "Hey, isn't that the dude that you worship?" And I'm like, "I think it is." And he's like,
Uh-huh.
"But I had no more money." I'm like, "I can't really buy. I don't have any more money for his books." And my friend Andy was like, "Here's the money. Go buy a book. Go get it signed." And I'm like, "Okay." And so, but like, I went over to his table. My friend Andy, who knew how nerdy I could get with things, or how easy it is for me to nerd out, was with me just
Mhm.
as my translator, as it
Yeah,
were.
yeah, yeah.
And so I go up to Dave McKean, and he had this little postcard book that he had drawn, and I forget what it was called, but it was just this little
Mhm.
square book for like $15. And and Dave McKean, who was very sweet, and I apologize for butchering his accent, but he's like, "Hello, how are you?" And I'm like, I like your comics, is what I said. He's
Uh,
like, would you like me to sign that for you? And I'm like, I didn't even say a word. I just nodded. And I slid the book over to him, and he's like, how do you spell your name? I'm like, and my friend Andy was like, his name is Patrick without a K. He's like, oh, so he's like drawing this little cool cat person in the book, and everything like that. And I was like, I gotta tell him something. I gotta tell him something. And so I blurt out of an apropos of nothing, and I say, Dave, I want you to know that I sleep with a copy of Arkham Asylum with my pillow every night. You make me want to be a comic book artist. And he goes, oh, really? Security, security. And my friend Andy was like, he doesn't get out very much. And I go, I really don't. I have nothing else. And I go and I leave. And he's like, thank you. And the yellow shirt people came in and kind of stared at me a little bit. And I was like, okay. And I walked away. And I was like, boy, I'm glad he didn't press charges.
wow.
That was just weird, to him, And again, the nicest guy around, but I'm just like this, my friend Andy's like 6'4" and I'm like 6'2", and there's these two dudes just like staring at him and telling him that they stick a book underneath his pillow. What is he gonna say? And so that was the first and only time I met Dave McKean. He won't return my friend request for some reason. I'm kidding, but he was very sweet and he handled it very well, and I was weird. Let's put it that way. So, yeah,
that's a great story. I feel like also that probably was his, I don't want to say knee-jerk reaction, but that was probably from Sandman fame. As soon as that red flag goes up, he's like, listen, I need some help here. Come here, because he's probably been in situations with Sandman fans that are like, oh, not only do I sleep with your books underneath my bed, there's several guns underneath that pillow too. You know what I mean? Or something like that, but that's such a great story. And plus, like, I feel like those days are like, not to sound like I'm, like I'm 41, not to sound like an older man or an old man, but like I feel like those days of being able to like, hey, sign my book or maybe do a little something in there are a little bit long gone, because I used to like same thing. Like I used to walk around with a sketchbook and just politely, like very politely ask folks like from like almost like 20 years ago, say like, hey, would you mind doing like a little thing? Oh yeah, no problem. And it was just like free of charge, you know what I mean? Like, thank you very much. And like you can't do that now. And that's like I feel like probably one of the last times that guy has ever like done something like that,
I mean, like when people do, like when I first started going to conventions, I would do that for people happily, but like my problem was that I would spend so much time on it that I needed to probably start asking money for it. And I still don't. I mean, like I know I was like, okay, I could tell them that I could just I've learned to better like just do a sketch and not like a sketch,
The
crafty thing is though they'll do like they'll hand you a book sometimes, and you'll see like a Mike Mignola sketch, you'll see a Bill Sienkiewicz sketch, you'll see like a Mark Silvestri sketch. You're like, I'm not going to do a bad sketch and be next to Mark Silvestri, And so like, it's
that was my move.
Like motivator. You're like, oh hell, I'm going to show up Bill Sienkiewicz, I mean, like, I'm not going to do just like, a stick figure with like, with like devil horns. No, I'm going to draw Hellboy,
right.
So it's kind of a thing where like, I don't, of course, I'm sure it's not intentional, but like it's being next to other artists, it immediately triggers imposter syndrome, and it's immediately like, well, let me show you what I can do, for free and everything.
That's so funny too. It's like when I still have that sketchbook, I love it. It's like one of my prized possessions. And like the one sketch that did that for every artist that I had put in that book after was Charlie Adler during the Walking Dead stuff. He did a colored Rick for me. And like colored it. He was like, oh, I just got these new markers. I can't do his accent, but he's, I just got these new markers. I'm going to do a colored version if that's okay. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. When whoever saw that sketch after that was like, oh, Charlie did he did a colored Rick Grimes for you. Give me 1 second. And it would just be like these beautiful works of art. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I've been that guy. I've been that
pretty crappy, I mean, I applaud it. I'm like, okay, there's no better way to motivate an artist is to show him all the other cool stuff other artists have done.
Well, there's also that curiosity, right? There's that Pandora's box of like, oh, cool, you got a sketchbook. Let me see what's here. Oh, I know.
I mean, like I'm both a fan and an artist, so I get it.
Yeah.
Like I want to have like
Mm.
Jason Sean Alexander, draw something for me, even though we've now worked together on Ha's
Yeah.
Nightmare blog, and or have Bill Sienkiewicz draw something for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love. I mean, even though like I wouldn't even call him my peer, I would just
Mhm.
say, I'm still like that to that point where I revere other artists,
Yeah.
like of course I'm still in that Dave McKean fanboy phase where I'm like,
Mhm.
oh god, it's before I'm like, oh god, it's Mike Mignola. Even though I work with Mike Mignola a lot, I still nerd out on him.
Yeah.
And Mike, I think, has learned to like deal with me a little bit.
Yeah.
I do have a funny Mike Mignola story too. Like we were at Emerald City one year, and this was like 2014, I think. And Mike Mignola's wife Christine is super nice. She
Mm.
wanted to take everybody who's worked on Mike Mignola stuff out to dinner, a nice dinner in Seattle,
Mm.
as a thank you. And I was sitting right across from Dave Stewart, and right next to Mike Mignola, and right across from Tim Sale. And
Mhm.
Tyler Crook was there too, and I was just sort of like trying not to like do the nerd boy thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mike was just talking about like Neanderthals or something like that,
Mhm.
and then he talked about how he almost died in 1983. And I go
Wow.
like, he almost died in 1983, and he goes, whatever, Reynolds, were you even born yet? And I go like, yeah, I'm actually 65 years old. It's really weird. And he's like, really? And I'm like, no, it's fine. And then I had a pining contest with Dave Stewart, and I lost, but like it was, it's everybody's still a person,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've noticed we're all, someone told me once, we're all just sort of fans making comics, right?
Yeah.
So I just think it's really cool that I can have a pining contest with Dave Stewart, and then I can high five. I've not met Christian Ward in person yet. We're trying to figure that out.
Wow.
We Zoom a lot, but we have not met in person.
Yeah.
Like he would tell me, he's like, dude, when we go to a convention together, we're gonna hug the shit out of each other, and like, you bet, we're gonna do it. But we're, at the end of the day, we still like talk about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Like he's like, that's one of my favorite movies. I'm like, yeah, me too. We both like similar movies. We both
Yeah.
talk about cool things that motivate us, and there's a lot of similar things. Because at the end of the day, we're all just sort of making our own cool thing that hopefully people will like.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. That's such a great. That's refreshing to hear that, because it's such a great attitude to have, especially somebody who's in the comic book business. Because like it's either, I feel like sometimes it's either or. Either somebody's going to be super enthused and really happy with their career path, or it's going to be the bitter guy. And I don't want to talk to the bitter guy.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I've been bitter too, a little bit, but then
Yeah.
I'm like, and it's, I need to be reminded sometimes,
Mhm.
that at the end of the day, really, uh, I can't imagine doing anything else, and I
Yeah.
am glad I'm here, and now the work comes now where I got to figure out how to like not destroy myself while making these things.
Mhm.
That's the thing I'm most worried about now. I'm lucky enough to work on, to talk to Christian Ward about anything anytime I want now, and
Oh, right on.
hopefully
Yeah.
have a foot in the door with DC Comics for the next thing, whenever that may be.
Mhm.
So I don't have to worry about getting work anymore. It's now about
Right.
managing my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, it's interesting where I've been drawing comics for 13 years now, and it's never really been one. It's never just been that job where I go to every day and I can leave it alone. It's a
Mhm.
creature, the job
Yeah.
is a character in and of itself. Like backgrounds are Heather Moore's colors. So
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's that. I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you again for doing this. But before I let you go,
Sure.
what's your favorite sandwich, Patrick?
Oh my God, I'm in Portland. There's a lot of great sandwiches in here, but I would go with a vinaigrette caprese sandwich
Oh,
with vinaigrette caprese cheese. No, excuse me, no, vegan caprese cheese. Although I'm not vegan, I like that cheese that's just on the edge of liquefied.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like get that cheese loose kind of thing. So basically, it's a really fancy grilled cheese sandwich, but with like vinaigrette, tomatoes, and a little bit of basil on it. Oh my gosh, that's a spiritual experience. Woo!
What kind of bread?
Whatever. I don't even needs bread. It can be on a coaster for all I care. But like, I think is it sourdough? I think they put it on.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's hard to pick just one here. I like sandwiches with names like the Steve Martin or the Viking or the
Yeah.
Balrog. you know, deep fried everything with like, just a brick of meat in it, something,
Oh man.
uh,
I'm terrified of going to Portland. I've never visited Portland. I'm terrified of going because I know so many people that live there and every single one of them says you would love it here. And I
yeah.
feel like if I went, I'd probably drink the Kool-Aid and be like, do you want to move? I'll tell my wife, do you want, like, she can do her job from anywhere. I can do my job from anywhere, like maybe Portland. So I'm like a little scared to go to Portland. And everybody tells me the food's awesome.
It is. I don't know how they do it, but like, yeah, the best southern food I've ever had is in Portland. I'm sorry, I went
Wow.
to Savannah, and I'm half expecting like Paula Dean to burst through my door, like, go, let me tell you about a donut sandwich. And I'm like, okay, but like, yeah, Portland knows their food, man. I don't know
Yeah.
how or why, but geez, it is the Graceland of food here, man.
Wow. That's
is.
high. That's high praise. That is high praise.
Always impressive. Yes.
Awesome, man. All right, Patrick, where can everybody find you?
They can find me on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is just my name. It's Patric_Reynolds on Instagram, or Patrick J. Reynolds. But yeah, if you just my name is Patrick without a K. You type in Patric Reynolds without a K, you're gonna find me on Instagram and Twitter on Instagram and Twitter very easily. I'm also on comicarthouse.com, but again, my name's up there. And I have a website, www.murderinginc.com, and that's my own personal website, so you can check that out if you need to. I'm updating it now with new work and everything now, so check it out. Let me know what you think.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Rich. Thank you so much.
I can't thank Patrick enough for doing the interview, and I know he's going to blow up even more with whatever he does next. Quite a talented guy. It was truly a pleasure to talk with him. Listen, go get Bloodstained Teeth. We mentioned the creative team during the episode, but Christian Ward, Heather Moore, Patric Reynolds, Hassan Osman El How, I hope I said that right. They deserve all the flowers. Really, truly great book. Stay tuned for our next episode where I talk to DB Andre about his writing and End After End out from Vault Comics. I'll see you soon, my babies. Mwah. Bye.